Welcome to the Hollywood Makers Podcast. My name is Glori. I am your host for this episode, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Albert Bermonte, who is a talent agent, psychology professor, and author of the book Rise Above the Script. We're going to get into his career journey and talking about some of the mental hurdles actors and people in the entertainment industry overall face and how to overcome them. So let's get started. Thank you, Albert, so much for being with us here today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your career so far?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on here, Gloria. I'm really happy to be here.
Mm,
So, yeah, I work I work with artists mainly. So I'm a talent agent in New York area. I've been doing that for about 21 years now. And I also have a background in psychology. So in addition to doing that, I am an adjunct psychology professor at Manhattan Community College in New York City. I've been doing that for about 9 years now at that college. I've also taught at other colleges over the years. And so I have the background in this, and I was able to kind of blend a little bit together with like more in the performance mindset area. So when I was going for finishing my PhD, my dissertation was on self-defeating behavior in performing artists. And that's what led me down to writing my book, Rise Above the Script, which was published in 2024. And then also led me to really start studying and looking more into self-sabotage, career success, imposter syndrome, and
yeah,
all of that phenomena.
yeah. I love that. That's so interesting. Um,
hmm
that's actually really unique that you have the kind of two sides of the business, right? The like kind of psychology aspect, but then also like the talent representation. Did you start on like either side and then kind of decided to like go one way or another, or what was like kind of the initial path in?
Well, the initial thing is, to be quite honest with you, I never anticipated going into the performing arts industry.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I declared, I'd say by the end of my sophomore year, that I was going to be a psych major.
Love.
And so I was always an avid reader, growing up in a family with all athletes, me being which one doesn't belong here, that was me. So because I'm the youngest of five, and my older brothers, I have three older brothers that were very much into sports,
Mm,
blue collar sports. My father was a football coach. My oldest brother was a football coach. And I just felt really different,
yeah.
because I was not an athlete by any stretch of the means. I
Mm,
was a reader. I found myself in the library. I found myself reading books. Like I was in high school, I was reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie,
yeah.
Feeling Good by David Burns, and Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. All classics, but those were sort of like where I was reading. And I just became so interested in the human mind. So initially my goal was to be a clinical psychologist, researcher, PhD,
Mm,
professor, all of that. When I was still in high school, that was my goal.
yeah.
And I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, some aspect. Not necessarily secondary school, but more on the college side.
Yeah.
Now, my mom was a teacher, for 30, plus years teaching kindergarten to first grade, and my father was a football coach. And, so I think the coaching and teaching side of my family just kind of blended together.
Yeah. It's always
And
been
so
in.
naturally,
Mhm.
that led me down to, I guess, like teaching, you could say, is in my blood.
Yeah. I was gonna say
So,
genetics.
yeah, it definitely is. So that's where, I shined. And when I was finishing up my master's degree, I found myself by luck, doing an internship at a talk show, more on the crisis intervention, as de-escalation point of side of things.
Mhm.
And so that's where, I got my first foray, you could say, or taste of professional entertainment. Now, looking back in hindsight, I knew I never would want to work in a talk show again
Sure.
because it kind of gave me the rude awakening of what TV is really like.
Yeah.
Now, like, I can tell, a little bit of a secret here. It's not, it's pseudo reality. When I say pseudo reality, the stories are real, the people are real, but it's also staged and
Yeah.
choreographed.
Mhm.
And I think that was my biggest let, I want to say almost a letdown to some level because it to realize how artificial it was.
Yeah.
Like for example, the host reads from a teleprompter. The host gets an earpiece.
Yeah.
Every line, every comment that might seem like a genuine I care is all scripted.
Yeah. It is a little bit like the bubble burst, right? Like you have this kind of idea and you're like, oh, never mind. Like this is
Yeah.
the reality. And it
So
makes sense when you think
when that was over, I said to myself, I'm
about it.
never going to work in this area because it was exploiting people. I mean, that's at the about at the end of the day, it
Yeah.
was exploiting people.
Mhm.
And so that now I kind of put that still back in my head. I was like, okay, well, let me find a job. Now, unfortunately, 9/11. This was the same year of 9/11.
Wow.
And being that I'm in New Jersey, New York, so I wasn't like near 9/11, but I'm relatively close to that area, like 20,
Okay.
25 minutes.
Wow.
So I got a call from the people that I worked in this talk show with that were like, look, we need help. We're assembling a team. Can you come down and do some volunteer work and, do some crisis intervention? And so I found myself doing
Yeah.
that because I was looking for a job. And then while doing that, I started meeting a lot of actors, filmmakers, and documentary filmmakers and narrative filmmakers. And I really found myself like, oh, this acting thing is interesting because
Mm.
to backtrack slightly, I was in a drama club in high school. And I
Love that.
also took some acting classes in college.
Mhm.
But the one thing that really stood out from all of these experiences, for some reason, I really felt seen and heard amongst theater and people and actors and show business type,
Yeah.
more
It's
so than I do with the academic type. So, but I still really thought nothing of that when I was in high school and college.
mhm.
So while I was doing this, I kind of said, well, I always was interested in acting, so let me try myself as an actor. And this was right before in my mid 20s, and I said I did a little bit of acting, and I realized it wasn't for me.
Yeah. It
I
happens.
really
You
didn't
start something.
enjoy
Yeah.
acting,
Mhm.
but I enjoyed being around actors. I enjoyed the environment, like just being around people.
Yeah.
So I said, well, okay, I don't want to be an actor, but how do I keep myself immersed in this space? And so I kind of still did some soul searching. I started advocating for actors. I started looking out for actors. And you know what? Let me start representing them.
Mhm.
And then 2004, I started my first company, my first talent representation company, which became a full-fledged agency in 2008, early 2008.
Wow.
And so I've been doing that ever since. But during this time, as an entrepreneur, it's kind of like it's unshaky.
Yeah.
You're on shaky ground. I
Sure.
wanted to back up plan. I was teaching now at the community college, and I said, you know what? I want to go for my PhD. I always wanted to do it. Let me go back. And so I did. I enrolled in Walden University, which I received my PhD from, which is an online distance ed program. Now,
Mhm.
this was 20 years ago when I enrolled, so at that time it was a bit unconventional.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of mixed views when I told people I was going for a PhD online.
Sure.
Some people were like, oh, Um,
Mhm.
while doing this, as I was building my company, I kept running into actors that were self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
And what I mean by self-sabotaging, showing up late for appointments, coming up with excuses why they couldn't do the appointment, yet at the same time telling me how much they really wanted to act. So wasn't adding up. Their thoughts, their words, and their actions were not aligning.
Mhm.
And so I had to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
And that led me to, maybe there's something going on here. So when it came down for my doctoral dissertation, solve a real world problem that you're facing,
Mhm.
there we go.
Yeah.
And so I did that was my doctoral dissertation on self-defeating behavior in performing artists. It was groundbreaking because there was really nothing written professionally about actors at that
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
So this was exciting. And, I was told by my advisors, even at the time, oh, you should publish. This is like publishable work. And I put it on the back burner for years.
Sure. It happens.
So fine, and I would tell people in conversation, yeah, I'm gonna write a book someday,
Mhm. Yeah. Like down the line when I
and
get time for it.
yeah, when I have
Mhm.
time for it, or someday, later.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can tell you, anybody who I ever talk to, the word someday and later should be out of your vocabulary, because what that entails, it almost like tells me or the world that it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Honestly.
Because how many some days have you wanted to travel the world, or how many some days do you hear that? Well, yeah, I'm going to do this someday. No, start planning now. And so that's what I do now when I work with people. It's like, okay, let's plan this now.
Hmm.
Let's start the planning process.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you can't do the goal right away, but let's start planning for it today. Take
Hmm.
actions towards that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like everything you're saying so far, like I honestly really like relating to it. Because for me, when I was in undergrad, I studied human development, which is like a bit of like psychology, sociology, some
Hmm.
biology in there. And then I kind of pivoted a bit because I wanted to go into marketing. But I think it was like the idea of the same concepts, right? Understanding kind of like the human mind and like how it works. Like that does translate into like the entertainment world a lot because it is a very like people forward industry, right?
Hmm.
And I think I definitely hear what you're saying too, because I feel like I hear this with people and friends of mine. Like, very specifically, I have one friend who's an actress, and she's like, we've talked about this so much in like the past couple weeks about how she's just like, I feel like I'm my own biggest enemy, and like it's just
Hmm.
over and over. Like, I know I want to do this. She was one of those people who like she was from Chicago, moved out to LA, literally quit her job, and is now like focusing on it full time. But she's like, it's just those little hurdles and everything. So I guess kind of like on that idea when it comes to like working with talent and seeing like those hurdles, you mentioned that like the being your own worst enemy, the kind of self-sabotage. What is like the advice that you give people to kind of get out of that, and what does that look like also?
Well, the it's very sneaky, because I can
Mhm.
tell you that most people who self-sabotage have no idea that what they're doing. It's not a conscious behavior pattern, but it
Mhm.
is self-protective. So the one thing I would say is, like, start looking at, your past efforts, and if you notice that, okay, maybe you stop too soon, because that can be self-sabotage. You're almost there, but then you pull back
Yeah.
and you play out of safety. Um, and you know, you always feel like you're missing opportunities, that things are just slip passing you by, and that might be an indication that, well, you're. It's not other people; it's you
Mhm.
that's holding yourself back
Yeah.
because you're not taking advantage of things. And one of the biggest self saboteurs is comfort,
Mm.
and we like to be comfortable. Every one of it. I mean, that's how we survive. I mean, that's a survival mechanism, to want to
Yeah.
be comfortable.
Yeah.
But that's also not going to be helpful in some cases. Now, one of the things that's also, when I say it's a protective mechanism, it's from fear.
Yeah.
Now, fear is a evolutionary mechanism that helps us survive. Thousands of years ago, when we were cavemen and hunter-gatherer days, we had so many different threats to us. We had, environmental threats, airborne threats, germs, bacteria, predators, large animals, and or even other people. So we constantly had to be on a high alert system to survive. That's how we survive.
Yeah.
Our brain still is in that mode of survival, because that's where that's what it does. So it does a wonderful job of doing that for us, but it can also work in overdrive.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
sometimes it's all about kind of like even hacking your neurology by saying, okay, I notice a fear happening here. Okay, it's just fear.
Mhm.
And while there are some valid cases where, okay, we don't want to be reckless with our lives, but at the same time, fear really is what I call false evidence appearing real. That's the definition I
Mm.
heard, an acronym which I think,
Yeah.
I mean, this has been like, said thousands of times, and I really like that acronym,
Yeah.
false evidence appearing real.
Mhm.
Because very often what we start doing in our heads is we start imagining the worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And oftentimes the worst case scenario is much more dramatic and much more spectacular than reality.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so when we imagine ourselves failing at something, we fear that. But the actual looking like it's like we're gonna not only we're just gonna fail, we're gonna crash and burn at the same time,
Yeah, like it's gonna be the
and
worst experience
yeah,
ever.
it's gonna be like spectacular, like dumpster fire.
Yeah.
In reality, even if we don't get the intended outcome, it's not never nearly as bad as the as what we think it could be. And
Yeah.
I'll give you an example, a story. So 2 years ago, I was with one of my agencies that I worked for 3 years. I had partnered up with somebody, and like with a lot of partnerships, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so it came in 2023 when our industry was kind of in turmoil because we had the two strikes, the Writers
Mhm.
Guild and Screen Actors Guild. I said to myself, you know what? I think it's time to go back on my own. I think it's time to go and start my own company again and work solo.
Yeah.
So now, this was also a very uncomfortable thing to do because I had to end a business relationship.
Mhm.
Thankfully, it was a cordial, and professional split, not a messy one.
Yeah, but it's still always like
But
really scary to like branch out and now like leave something like you said, the comfortable, right, to go into something that's a bit more.
oh, it was really
Yeah.
because I was like, what, for months, because this was like a decision that both me and my ex partner, business partner, had made, months in advance.
Hmm.
And I mean, we did it the right way, but one of the things I was worried about, okay, I got to tell my clients, my acting clients, we got to tell these, we got to tell the industry, and I just kept imagining that this is going to go be bad, and I was going at the whole dumpster fire, like
Hmm.
this is going to go, I'm going to lose all these clients, and everybody's going to be so upset
Hmm.
that I don't think it was even 1/10 as worse as I thought it was going to be when it actually happened.
Wow.
I would say maybe a few people asked like what happened. But I would say 95% of everybody I told were like, I want to support you. Good luck. Let's
Yeah.
do that. And it was amazing. And so now it's like, okay, when I start getting at worst case, nope, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so a couple of things that I've learned, and this is one thing I've learned, and which I impart to other people. Every mistake or every failure, when I say failure, a lot of times there's a negative connotation with that. It's a learning experience.
Hmm.
It's feedback.
Yeah.
Like the person, one of the inventors of like, a popular item, forget which item it was, but he said he found, there was 1,000 prototypes
Hmm.
before it came to the right thing. And somebody asked him, well, why didn't you give up? And he said, because that was 1,000 feedback points to get me closer to where I am now.
That's
And
true.
so what we can do is look at whatever failure or things don't go our way and transform that into feedback. So there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
Mhm.
Learning to fail forward. So, and here's a prime example. This is every, if you worked with children or been around children, toddlers, infants, the biggest physical task they have to learn to do is walk.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now, walking is a complex action, physical, motor, coordinated action that we take for granted because we can just walk upright without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
But if you ever watch an infant or toddler learning to walk, it's a lengthy, arduous process. They have to stand on their own 2 feet, coordinate that, balance, take one foot in front of another. That requires balance, that requires flexibility.
Hmm.
It takes months sometimes, weeks, months, and what do? They fall down so many times.
Yeah. They like
But
wobble around.
wobble around, stumble, fall,
Mhm.
stagger. And they may fall down like hundreds of times.
Mhm.
But you've never seen anybody in the history of human say, that's it. I give up walking.
Yeah. I just refuse to learn. Yeah.
I
That is.
refuse to learn to walk. Or you don't have parents saying to their to their toddler, well, walking's not for you. But okay, but then what happens because that persistence and tenacity, we
Mhm.
learn to walk flawlessly.
Yeah.
And why do you think we do that? And that's the question I have to ask is, well, if the infants can do that with walking, why
Mhm.
do we give up so easily when we get frustrated?
Yeah. It's like just a part of everything, right? It's like that. This is like something my mom is always saying to me. She's always like, nothing good comes easy. You always have to practice
Hmm.
at something. You have to like, it's like, I think people get caught up in the idea of like, oh, I want this thing and it's going to be so great. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But also like the path to getting there is not necessarily going to be beautiful or amazing
Right.
because that's just the reality of life, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's sometimes that frustration or that confusion is right
Mhm.
before we actually master something.
Yeah. Exactly. It's
So,
like if you just kind of power through, you can get to that point that like you're wanting to get to. And I think that is like something that I think
hmm
everyone struggles with. I think definitely something that like I struggle with a bit these days, especially is that like I know it's like you're down, but it's like, oh, I have to keep going. And it's just like sometimes you're like, but I'm so tired. And there's like this excuse and like, oh, but I tried so hard and it didn't work out, or I was so genuine and like it
hmm
wasn't rewarded or whatever. But it's like the kind of just putting all that aside or taking the good that you can out of it and then
hmm
trying to like baby steps to getting like, back to walking again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you mentioned something about excuses, and it's so easy for us to come up with excuses for things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too tired today. It's raining. I don't like the weather. It's too cold.
Yeah.
I got a headache, and I don't want to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
your brain doesn't take you doesn't take much to talk yourself out of doing something.
Absolutely.
So, and that's when you have to kind of start taking a step back and saying, okay, am I really tired or is this fear talking? Do I
Mhm.
really have a headache, actual headache, or is this fear talking?
Yeah.
You know, do I really not feel like doing this or is this fear? And
Yeah.
when you start framing it like that, you start to see, okay, now you can sort of recognize the patterns. So that's one way, as I said, to answer your question earlier, recognition
Yeah.
that this is happening. The second thing that's really important for anybody who's pursuing success, which we all are, is to watch the crowd you keep, the energy you keep, the company you keep. So you want to hang out with really positive, strong-minded people,
Yeah.
people that will build you up. And and maybe you may not be able to physically do that, but you can do it virtually. You can start, joining online communities you know, and other things like that, just to build yourself up and build your network up, the people that will hold you accountable and that will be a champion of your success. One of my mentors used to say, you want to hang out with people that appreciate you, not tolerate you.
Definitely.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and it's a very powerful saying.
Mhm.
So, and, one of the painful truths sometimes can come in this is that, some people that are in your life right now may not necessarily be on your side.
Yeah.
And I was listening to another podcast once that, the theme of it was not everybody can come with you.
True.
And I'm thinking that's so powerful because not everyone can go with you.
Yeah. That
Um,
definitely makes sense. I think that's a hard one to swallow though. It's very much like, especially when there's people who you have really good intentions towards and you have a lot of like love for them or you have a lot of you're on their side and you know that, but it's like sometimes people are not necessarily doing the same back for you. And it's like being able to kind of have that discernment to kind of know who those people are and knowing like, okay, moving more towards the people who are on my side and like a little bit away from the people who are against you. But that can be
yeah.
like a lot easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. This is more. It's very easy to give lip service to that because some of the people are close to us, our family.
Yeah.
How do you not? And so you may not be able to physically distance yourself because again, it is family, but you
Sure.
can start to psychologically and not be impacted because those
Mhm.
are just words that somebody says to us.
Yeah.
And so, coming to that is another kind of point I want to make. Is take ownership of your feeling.
Yeah.
Take ownership of how you respond. You may not be able to control that critical relative. They may say these words. Those are just words. How
Sure.
you choose to respond is your choice.
Thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to come back to hear part 2 of the conversation with Dr. Bermonte. In the meantime, make sure to like, subscribe, and be a part of the Hollywood Makers community. I'll talk to you again soon.